For more, let's cross to Ottawa. Jamie Hitchen is Research Fellow at the University of Birmingham. Thank you for speaking with us here on France 24.
Thank you for having me.
Does the government story that it was a coup attempt hold up?
Well, I think it's still quite early in this to say definitively that that is indeed the reality. I mean, investigations are still ongoing. The government has obviously moved on from its initial description of the incident as a security breach to now describing it as a failed attempted coup, and they've released the names and pictures of individuals that they want to ascertain the location of in order to investigate this more thoroughly. I think, we have seen the government in the past, in the last year, for example, in response to protests in August 2022, describing events there as an insurrection against the state. We haven't yet seen much evidence in support of that. So I think it's still early to say, but it's certainly something we are needing to follow up with, and it'll be worth keeping an eye on to see how the investigations proceed.
Jamie, when you heard the news over the weekend, were you surprised? It's been 2 decades since there was a civil war in Sierra Leone. Yes, there were irregularities pointed out during August presidential elections, but was this a surprise, the fact that you had what may be a mutiny, what may be a coup attempt?
I think, yes, probably it was a bit of a surprise. We have seen there were some arrests made in July and August by the government, accusing a number of individuals. I think 17 in total were arrested for a potential planning of a coup. Now, there was little follow-up and evidence that has been presented to show evidence that that was indeed the case. But I think it's, that there are clear frustrations around the June election process, some of those which continue to exist, and the economic challenges that Sierra Leone continues to face have perhaps been some of the drivers behind this. But I still think that it is perhaps a surprise that the level at which the kind of the severity of the incident that we saw on Sunday that took place.
Before Sierra Leone descended into civil war, it was almost kind of a two-party system that you had in the country. It seemed to have kind of gone back to that to a degree. Who are the forces at play right now in running Sierra Leone?
Yeah, so Sierra Leone, is very much a two-party state. The individuals, the two main parties are the ones that hold all the seats in the parliament. The Sierra Leone People's Party, which is the current ruling party, which has been in power since 2018, and the All People's Congress that was in power for the previous decade from 2007 to 2018. Smaller parties have emerged, but largely have tended to be reabsorbed into those larger parties as in between election periods. So those parties have kind of continued to dominate, and we've seen now very much a kind of strengthening of that two-party system in the last election. And those parties do have their strong kind of ethno-regional bases, which continue to drive apparent voting patterns.
Drive of voting patterns, and where do you situate in all of this the current president, Julius Maada Bio, since after all, in a different life, he was a coup leader?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's how Maada Bio first became leader of Sierra Leone, albeit briefly in the 1990s. So, his election this year has obviously been contested by the opposition. They decided to, rather than challenge the results in court, and the results, I should say, were also kind of queried by prominent international election observation missions as well. But the response of the opposition was, rather than to challenge the outcomes in the courts, which they believed would not render a fair outcome, they chose instead to pursue a boycott of the legislative and local council seats that they were able to win, but that boycott came to an end in October with an agreement that was struck between the SLPP and the APC for a return, for the APC to return in exchange for a couple of concessions, including those around the release of political prisoners, the removal of corruption cases against the APC, which may or may not be deemed politically motivated, and also this electoral reform committee, which has now been introduced by the president, which will cut across both parties. So those were some of the kind of conciliatory measures that the two main party leaderships agreed to in October. But whether or not some of the rank and file or the grassroots supporters of the opposition were happy with that deal is perhaps something that kind of was behind some of the recent actions that we've seen in Freetown.
One final question for you, Jamie Hitchen. We have, if you look at the neighbors of Sierra Leone, on the one side, Guinea, where it's run by a coup leader now. On the other side, Liberia, where the outgoing president has just conceded defeat in his re-election bid. How would you say Sierra Leone's democracy is doing?
Yeah, it very much is in between, two extremes, if you like. I think, what's happened in Liberia is an example of what is possible for Sierra Leone's trajectory. Equally, what has prevailed in Guinea, it may also be an example. I think there are some legitimate concerns about the available space for criticism in Sierra Leone. The civic space seems to have shrunk in the last few years. That's not to say that I think that attitudes among citizens towards democracy are still very positive. There was a strong turnout around the election in 2023, but I think the concerns about the validity of the process, the election process, and the wider space for criticism of the government need to be addressed if Sierra Leone's to kind of follow Liberia's more positive democratic direction in the next 2 to 3 years.
Jamie Hitchen, many thanks for joining us from Ottawa.
Thank you.
Stay with us. There's much more to come here on France 24. More news plus the day's business. And in sports, the French are getting the Olympics again. This time it'll be in the winter. Stay with us.